Prices on everything have gone up so much over the past 3 years, and particularly when it comes to rental costs. So if you are a tenant right now, you may have seen your rent go up significantly, whether you're renting a single family home, an apartment, condo, townhouse, regardless. Rent prices have just been really putting a strain on people's budgets. So in today's video, we're going to go through 10 easy ways that you can help yourself out in that department and hopefully save yourself a little bit of money and get a little bit more understanding of how you can take some strain off yourself during this difficult time when it comes to housing costs, which are so important. Having a safe place to live is so important, and that is just something that we really can't do without, but a lot of people are having to really compromise on that right now because of the cost of living crisis that we're in. So for 10 easy tips on how to save money on rent, keep on watching. Hello, I'm Sarah Edens. I'm a finance coach, author, and wealth mindset researcher, and I'm here to teach you how to unlock your inner millionaire by developing a wealth mindset and building solid financial skills that will set you up for success so that you can go on to live your dream life, whatever that looks like to you, because you know best what's right for you and what your dreams are. No one can determine that for you, but I'm here to give you the tools and skill sets so that you have access to the financial resources that you need to be able to set your life up however you want to. Thank you so much for being part of my community, and I want to say a big welcome to all my new subscribers. We had a lot of new subscribers over the past week. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to all my returning viewers. I am so happy you're here. Thank you for all your lovely comments and for liking my videos. That just is so encouraging and such a great way for you to support what I'm doing here. So thank you so much. All right, well, let's jump right into it. So rental money saving tip number one is to negotiate your rent. So this is something that is really interesting. Prices are a lot more negotiable than we think. And I have a great book. I've probably got it back on my bookshelf somewhere and I should have grabbed it, but I'll link to it in the description box. It's actually written by an FBI hostage negotiator, and he teaches you how to negotiate various aspects of your life. And one of them he talks about is how to negotiate prices on different things. And so I would definitely read that book if you're planning to be getting into a new rental situation, because it will really give you like a pro insider look at how price negotiation works and how much more control we have over prices when it comes to situations like rentals than we might think. So that can be something as well that you want to do up front, obviously, because afterwards it's a bit hard if you're already in the rental and you're signed into a year or longer lease. There's really no wiggle room there because you've just legally signed on the dotted line to pay what you're going to be paying for your lease term. But before that, it's a great opportunity to just think through how to negotiate that price down so that it's a little more favorable for your budget, or maybe you get some amenities thrown in. Maybe if it's a home you're renting, for example, you can get lawn maintenance thrown in, or maybe you can get trash haul away thrown in if that's not already included, or something else like that, some kind of special perk that the landlord might have access to and just hasn't thought to include in the price of the rent. So that's one thing to think about there. Number two is to opt for renting a smaller place. This is probably a no-brainer for you already, because when you look at rentals, they tend to be priced per square foot. So obviously the more square footage your rental has, the more it's going to cost you. Smaller is going to cost you less. It's also important to think about location. So if you're living in a very popular downtown area, for example, that a lot of people want to live in, your rent is pretty much guaranteed to be higher than if you're willing to live further out in the suburbs and then commute to work. So just look around and see what the rental prices are. Zillow, I'll link to Zillow in the description. But Zillow is a really good research tool if you're looking for a new rental, whether it's an apartment, condo, single family home, you name it. There's so many good listings on there, and that will help you just to compare prices and see, okay, sometimes even within the same 5-mile radius, you might have one apartment complex that's significantly less expensive than another and doesn't really have any major differences. It's just that they have it priced differently. So definitely do your homework as well on not just deciding what square footage is going to be best for your budget, but also in terms of the location, what is going to be the best price for you there as well, and how much you're willing to commute, the schools in the area, that kind of thing are all good to take into consideration as well. Number 3 is to buy renter's insurance. So this is really important. A lot of rental, like apartments and rental situations, will require you to buy renter's insurance anyway. But what this does is it covers the items in your home, so all of your physical property that you own within the home. And it's interesting. I used to work in insurance, and so I used to sell renters policies all the time. And the other thing that renters insurance does is it can save you a lot of money, because if you're moving, it also covers your belongings while they're in transit. And so that can save you so much money, because you think about how many things can get broken or damaged or just straight up lost during moves. And so that can really be a good money saver there. And as well, if there's any damage in your apartment complex while you're living there. So for example, last winter we had a really bad winter storm, and the power was out and lots of people's pipes froze. And so then what happened, of course, is then you have a lot of burst pipes. And so for many people that were living, especially in apartment complexes where there were many floors above them, they just ended up with their apartment literally turning into Niagara Falls, which was just devastating, because all of their furniture and their electronics and everything just got doused with so much water. And the apartment complex wasn't going to pay them back for all of that, even though it was the apartment complex's pipes that had burst. So definitely get renter's insurance. I feel like when it comes to insurance, and maybe this is just me being biased because I have a background in insurance, but I feel like you can almost never have too much insurance when it comes to these kind of situations, because it's a little bit of an investment every single month, obviously, to pay your insurance premiums. But if you're with a good company that's great about honoring claims and easy to work with, then it's such a just peace of mind component to know that you're not going to have be completely out of pocket should the worst happen to your whatever you have insured. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to pay your rent early, or at least on time. The easiest way to avoid costly late fees on not just paying your rent, but pretty much every other bill you can think of, is just to schedule your payments so that they drop a little bit earlier than they're due. And so a great way to do this is just to set up automatic payments through your bank, however you want to set that up. And then that way your payments will just go through every single month. You don't have to think about it. And you're not there being like, oh my goodness, I forgot to send the rent check, and now I have to call and ask for a grace period. And if you have a month where you're really not going to make the payment on time for some reason, just call your landlord or the leasing office. Just explain the situation and ask for a grace period, because very often they have one. They're usually about 7 to 10 days. So check around and see, what that option might help you out with as well. If it's kind of a one-off thing, that might save you some money on late payment fees, because those can really add up, and that's just throwing your money away. So if you are kind of a little bit more prepared and strategic, you'll save yourself a lot of money. Number 5 is to make sure your pets don't damage your rental. So as a military family moving around with multiple rescue pets, we have definitely been in and out of different people's homes, different apartment complexes with our pets, and we always tried really, really hard to take really good care of the properties, not just because that's the considerate thing to do, but also because when you move out, obviously when you move in, you have to put down extra security deposits, usually per pet. I want to say when at our last rental, it was somewhere between $250 to $500 per pet extra on top of the initial security deposit that we had to put down. So moving in with pets costs you a lot of money up front. And then if you move out and the landlord isn't particularly happy with the condition of the house, or your pets have maybe damaged the carpet or the flooring, or they dug big, huge holes in the yard or killed the lawn or something along those lines, then it's well within the landlord's rights to just keep all of the pet deposits, all your security deposit, and then potentially they might even send you a bill after the fact, after you've moved out, and say, hey, we found all this pet damage that your pets did, and now you owe us even more money, even though you moved out and you're no longer renting from us. So it's really important to, as much as is possible, just try to be a responsible pet parent and do your best to be able to keep your place that you're renting in good condition. And if there is something that happens, do your best to address it with the landlord while you're still living there and not after you move out and like leave it and then have them find out later, because then they're really not incentivized to work with you at all because you're not even their tenant anymore. So they're at that point, they're like, we'll just send you a bill. So that's something to keep in mind if you're a pet, have pets in your family. Number 6 is to work to improve your credit score. So this is good whether you're currently renting and are looking to move, or you're looking at moving into a different rental down the road. The better your credit score is, meaning the closer on the spectrum of 850, up that way it is, the better it's going to be for you in terms of, how attractive you are to a potential landlord and the kinds of terms and conditions you're going to get on your lease. Because landlords tend to favor people with higher credit scores because they then know from you having a good credit score that you're good at paying your bills on time. They want to do business with you. So it can really help you get access to better rental properties and just better situations all around, the better your credit score is. And definitely watch my credit score and credit use series here on YouTube. I have a whole playlist on that if you're looking for ideas to kind of improve your credit score if it's not where you'd like it to be. Or maybe you're like, Sarah, I don't even know what my credit score is. So go check out my playlist on credit use. And I go through all the scoop on how to start getting control over that aspect of your finances. Because every time you rent a place, the landlord is guaranteed to run your credit score because they want to know, hey, how likely is it that this individual is going to pay their rent on time, pay it at all, be a good tenant, that kind of thing. So it's a benchmark they often use. So keep that in mind as well. Number 7 is to avoid signing multi-year leases. I speak from experience on this one. And I actually have a bonus point that I'll throw in the end. So stay until the end because I thought of this last night when I was prepping for this show and kind of thinking through what I wanted to say. And I have this great bonus point, which is another lessons learned blooper of mine over the years. But yes, avoid multi-year leases. So this works really well for landlords because they have you locked in for a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years at a certain rate. But life happens. Things change. You and I both know that life can change on a dime. I mean, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's just that life is very unpredictable. And despite our best laid plans, things can just go kind of haywire sometimes. And so it is not really in your best interest to sign a multi-year lease because while it might look at the onset like, oh, I can lock in at this rate, and then if, rent goes up, then I'm not going to have to pay higher rent. Well, you might want to move, or you might lose your job and need to move, or you might just decide that you don't like your apartment complex anymore, or somebody moved in downstairs that plays blaring music all night, every night into the small hours of the night and keeps you awake, or whatever the situation might be. And then you're kind of stuck there because I did have one time when we got in a situation where we had signed a lease on an apartment, and it wasn't a multi-year lease in this case, but we decided that my husband's job ended up moving him to a different city with the military. And we've luckily had a military clause on our lease. And if you're a military family watching this, make sure that's on all your leases is the military clause that says if the military, PCSs you or moves you to another town, that you can break lease and not have any penalties. But for everyone else, what happens is if you decide to break lease early, then for whatever reason, they don't care why, you have to pay a really hefty buyout clause for the entire rest of your lease. And if you've looked at most leases, especially apartment complex leases, it's a stack of papers, this thick, full of fine print. You pretty much need a attorney to interpret it for you. And so that is something to just bear in mind as you're going through the rental process and getting ready to get everything signed. Just go year to year, honestly. And if you're not even sure if you want to commit to that much, just do 6 months. You can always go longer if you're loving a place and you've lived there for a few years and feel confident that you're going to stay. Sure, maybe look into a multi-year lease at that point. But while you're kind of getting your bearings, then I would say for sure just go year to year. And even past that, I wouldn't really recommend multi-year leases because the buyout clauses on them are so prohibitively expensive. And it makes no sense at all to spend your hard-earned money paying an apartment complex for an apartment that you're no longer even living in when you need that money for the down payment on your next home or the rent at your next place. So I speak from personal experience here. Did it once when we weren't military, and before I was married, it got very expensive trying to do the buyout clause. I was very bitter about that. And in hindsight, I probably should have just stayed and dealt with the rest of the term on my lease. But just something to keep in mind. Don't make the same mistake I did and save yourself the hassle and the money. All right, number 8 is to shop around for the best amenities. So this is especially true when it comes to apartment complexes, but it might also apply to single family homes, townhomes, condos. Look around and see what has the best other things that are included in the lease. So maybe that's you have access to a pool, maybe it's access to a gym, maybe you have trash pickup included, maybe you have lawn service included. I've even seen, there's obviously furnished rentals if you want to rent an entire furnished place and not have to even fuss with furniture. So all these different rentals often will have these different add-ons. So kind of look around and see what's going to get you the best value for your money, and look and see, okay, so here's how much they want for rent, what's included in that, and get that full snapshot of exactly how much is included in your rental price. And if you're not liking the value at one place, just go to the next place. Because like I was saying earlier, sometimes you'll have, an interstate and you'll have apartments on one side and apartments on the other, and they're all equally nice. But one management company will just have it priced drastically different than the others. Or maybe one building will be slightly older than the other one, so it'll be slightly more affordable, but still perfectly acceptable. So just kind of, think about all of those things when you're looking at it, kind of sum total, what are you getting for your rent? And again, that comes down to negotiation too, in terms of before you sign the lease. If the things you're looking for aren't included in the lease in terms of amenities, maybe you move on and find somewhere else that does give you a little bit more for your money, or see if you can negotiate some of those things with your landlord or with your leasing office. So that's something else to think about. And also too, remember when you're looking around at apartment complexes or homes or whatever, always look at the actual unit you're looking at renting, not just if it's possible at all, just to make sure that it doesn't have any weird odor or doesn't have mold or something really gross like that, because that's definitely happened to us before where, they showed us a sample unit in the apartment complex, but then the one we ended up renting was not in as good of shape. And so it's always good to look at the actual space you will be occupying and make sure that it's up to your standards and clean and nice, so that you're not having to stress about that, because it's very difficult to switch units within apartment complexes because they've signed you for that unit, not just to rent from the whole place. So especially apartment complexes make it really difficult to have much flexibility. So you kind of have to be smart and think it through up front and think about all these things. So I hope this is helpful. Number 9 is to get a full picture of all the costs associated with renting in the area you're looking at renting. So this is really important as well, just to kind of save yourself some money. So we kind of touched on this already, but it's good to not just assume that things are included with the rent. So it's check around and see, because in some places, depending on where you're renting, even things like utilities can be included in the rent, which, as you can imagine, can save quite a bit of money. Grocery or gas, which one? Trash pickup can be included in the rent as well. So that can be nice and save you some money that way. You might have access included to a gym or a fitness center, things like that. And then also too, it's good to ask about parking, because a lot of places will have some parking that's included, or you might have an assigned space. But then if you need more, you have to pay for those, and that can start to add up. Or if you want a garage or a covered parking spot, that will cost you more. So find out what's included in your rent and then find out what's extra. And again, it comes back to negotiating and seeing what you can get included in the price of the rent. So just be a smart shopper, and remember that when you see a price on something, it's especially when it comes to renting, that's negotiable. There's other places out there that might offer you more and just have a better setup or be more suited for yourself and your family. So just shop around and don't be in a rush signing a lease, because that way you're not rushing into something and then come to find out it really wasn't the right thing, and then you're kind of stuck with it for the next 6 to 12 months, hopefully not longer if you didn't sign a multi-year lease, right? All right, and number 10 is if you opt for a smaller apartment or studio, then definitely look for one with lots of light, big windows, things like that. Hopefully, it has a porch or a balcony and somewhere where you can maybe get some fresh air and let some light in that way. Those little details can really make a difference. We've had a couple of times when we were renting in very small places, and our small places with windows, like with a lot of windows and nice natural light, versus the small places that were just built without enough windows and just felt really cramped and dark. It was just a night and day difference. So, square footage is one thing, but then it's also about those small details that can really make or break a place for you. Is like, does it have light? Do you look out on a parking lot, or are you looking out on trees or something green or whatever? And you want to think about noise issues as well. So you don't necessarily want to get an apartment that's overlooking the pool because that can get very noisy, or that's overlooking, that's right next to the stairwell or the elevator. Things like that can really make a difference. And again, it can cost a lot of money to have to change apartments after the fact once you've signed. So definitely kind of think those things through and think about when you're shopping around for apartments, you want to think about, okay, not just what do I like about this apartment, but what might I hate about this apartment? What might really drive me nuts? What might really bother me? Are all the floors kind of that wood veneer? And so it's going to have a lot of echo from my neighbors upstairs and my neighbors downstairs, and their doggies running across the floor or their kids running across the floor. Like how's that going to work for me? So just kind of be a smart shopper, think those little details through. And then even if you end up needing to kind of compromise with where your budget is right now and get a smaller place, try to get the nicest small place you can afford with the nicest amount of natural light, the nicest view that the community has to offer, the quietest part of the community as well. That's often higher level apartments. It's often things that are kind of at the corner of the building, and then top floor is obviously going to be quieter than anything down below because you don't have any neighbors pounding around upstairs above you. And it's also worth thinking through how's the soundproofing in the building. The last place that we were renting before we moved here and bought our house here had terrible soundproofing. It was these condos that were kind of one up, one down. The people below us, you could literally hear everything they were saying, every last thing they were doing, every argument they had, it was really stressful and honestly kind of upsetting just having to kind of be present in another family's lives because we could just hear everything that was going on. And I'm sure it was the same vice versa for them as well. And especially if you work from home or you're working remotely right now, or you're an entrepreneur and can work from home, really, really important to think about that, about how much are you going to have to listen to your neighbors all day long. Hopefully you get nice neighbors who you like, but if you get neighbors who are really loud or have very loud tastes in music or have a lot of arguments and you're having to listen to all that squabbling coming up through the floorboards, think about that as well, because that's definitely something I've experienced that I can say, honestly, I would never want to do that again. It's always good to think about who's below you and who's above you and how much are you going to be able to hear them, and their dogs, for example, if they have a dog that stays home and barks all day while their family's at work, good to think about as well. So little details make a big difference and add up. So think that through, and then hopefully you can save yourself money not having to break lease and change apartments because of, a noise issue, for example, something like that. All right, and my final bonus tip, and this is the one that I thought about yesterday, is never, 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 never. And I don't know how many nevers I can say to emphasize this enough to you. Never, 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 never rent a home, a townhouse, apartment, I don't care what it is, sight unseen, which means that you saw a listing on Zillow or another rental site, you looked at the pictures, it looked nice, and you call up the real estate agent or the leasing office and say, hey, I'd really like to rent that. Can you send me the lease? And you do it all virtually. Do not do this to yourself. And I have a very scary story that I will share with you from my personal experience. So my husband and I were newlyweds, and we had been moving with the military, and we saw this listing for this little house that looked really nice. And, it was small and kind of older, but it looked fine. And so we thought, oh, well, we'll save ourselves the time off that we would have to take to go out and do a house hunting trip. And we'll just get this all signed, and then we can get all our stuff shipped there. It's going to save us so much time once we get there, right, to have our lease signed. Well, oh my goodness. So number one, on the trip out there, we both came down with this terrible flu. So we were both incredibly sick. So our move took a lot longer than it should have, just because we had to actually break up our move cross country and stay in a hotel until we both got better enough to even like continue the drive. Then when we show up and we're just like completely drained from having flu, we arranged to meet the leasing agent at the home that we had rented, and she was supposed to bring the keys. And I just never forget the feeling I had when she unlocks the door. We walk in and we're just hit in the face with just this huge waft of like cigarette smoke. Like I can't even tell you how horrible that feeling was, to know that we had signed on this lease and then they had not represented that it had been owned by a smoker who was then planning to rent their home out and hadn't done anything to clean the carpets or try and get the smell out at all. And just this, oh my goodness. And I just remember I just stood in the doorway. And it wasn't my best moment ever, but I just stood in the doorway and just pretty much had a meltdown because I was there. I was sick still. We'd just gone through this big move. We were in this city where we didn't know a soul. And then the house is just like almost uninhabitable. It smelled so bad of cigarette smoke. So don't do that to yourself. We did not know at the time, if you're a military family like we are, you can work with base legal and work on getting out of a situation like that if they misrepresented something around the house. So definitely talk with base legal if you get yourself in this kind of a situation. Or if you're not military, then a civilian attorney might be able to help you with this as well. But again, another really good reason to not sign a multi-year lease. And we went on to add insult to injury because we tried to make it better rather than figuring out a way to break lease and move somewhere else. So we had the carpets, we paid ourselves as like, you know, young married couple, didn't have a lot of money. We paid to have the carpets cleaned. We literally paid, we got permission first, but we literally paid to have the house painted because I just was so allergic to cigarette smoke. And there was just so much of it in the walls and it was making me feel so ill. So I paid to have the house painted, which is just insane. And we just did a lot of things. You know, when you're in your early 20s and you're just figuring life out and you're doing everything the hard way, we did not know what we were doing in that situation. And then it added a lot of stress on our marriage as well, because we had all this extra expense over a house that we didn't own, didn't like, weren't planning on staying in because we knew we were going to be moving again shortly with the military. But we were here just trying to make the best of a bad situation, and it was costing us far more than we could have afforded at the time, obviously. So learn from my mistakes, okay? Repeat with me. I will never rent anything that I plan to live in myself, plan to put my family in. I don't care if it's an apartment, single family home, townhouse, condo, whatever. I will never rent it without actually physically walking inside and looking at it first. Just promise me that you will learn from my mistake, because you will save yourself so much hassle, so much money, and so much headache, and even potentially stress on your relationship with your spouse. You will just save yourself all of that if you just take the time, go look at the place first, and make sure that it's somewhere that's, you know, suitable for human habitation, because homes can get issues like that, right? They can get issues with mold. And if you're allergic to mold, like I'm super allergic to mold, that can be a deal breaker. You can't even live in the house. Cigarette smoke, if you're like me and also highly allergic to that, deal breaker. You know, there's some other cases where something can be really wrong with the structure, and it just makes it really not habitable until a significant amount of renovation has been done on it. And as a tenant, don't be like me and be there trying to do those renovations. And then the homeowner probably loved us. We were probably their favorite tenants ever because we did all this work, and it was a lot nicer when we moved out than when we moved in, but not good for us. So I know you're a smart person and you are not going to make the same mistake I did. And so learn from my mistakes is all I can say. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. That was 10 points about how you can save some money as a tenant. And then the little bonus point was story time there about one of my biggest mistakes when it came to being a tenant. I have a lot of rental stories as from being a military spouse for many years. So I've definitely been around the block a couple of times with making big expensive mistakes when it came to rentals and just getting in situations that today, knowing what I know now, I would never get myself in. So hopefully this is all helpful for you. And I just want to say thank you again for being here until the very end. And I had some nice comments from my last couple of videos that I wanted to share with you. Let me pull them up here. All right, so I had some really lovely comments. I got one that said, "Great information, thank you. You are so welcome." And another one that said, "Amazing video, thank you. You are very welcome." I'm so happy that you all are enjoying these videos, commenting, liking. Thank you so much for being here. And let me know in the comments what kind of horror stories you've had with renting, lessons learned, and then also if you have any suggestions for our community about ways people can save on their rent and be smart and savvy as a tenant. I would love it if you'd share that as well. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you again soon in my next video.